ETSU with a statement victory against the UNCG Spartans. Hi, everybody. I'm Marky Billson, talking to you Saturday night after the Buccaneers' 71-61 victory against the UNCG Spartans. And it is a statement victory because I'm going to explain it this way. Here's UNCG, which, along with ETSU, last 5 years, one of those two teams has played for the Southern Conference title every season. Last 4 seasons, ETSU's won the Southern Conference twice, UNCG has won it once, and then there's the year that Wofford won it, and won a game in the NCAA, as a matter of fact. Of course, UNCG gave Gonzaga everything they could handle before the Zags went on to play for the national championship in the opening round of the NCAA tournament. So no slouches are UNCG. And I did think 2 years ago they should have gotten an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament. I think the Southern Conference is getting there as a basketball league. But what does it say that ETSU, with an entirely new roster, I mean, I know Vonnie Patterson was there last year. Vonnie Patterson was not an impact player last year. And Vonnie Patterson is not really that much of an impact player this season. So Vonnie Patterson, and then an all-new cast, a new head coach, all of that, they go into Greensboro as a 6.5-point underdog after struggling out of conference, and they go in with Wes Miller, probably the most established coach in the league, and Isaiah Miller, the best player in the league. So there's some establishment there in Greensboro, and ETSU comes away not only with a victory, but a convincing victory. Now, before the game, I told you, look and see who plays at point guard. And I really did expect Cyril Smith Jr., the transfer from Maryland, to play instead of David Sloan. And he did. Sloan was back after a 1-game suspension, broke some sort of team rule or disciplinary. They're not revealing what it is. But nevertheless, this is now, it looks like, Smith's team to run from the floor. Now, normally I don't like shooting point guards, but it's hard to argue when Smith goes 3 of 4 from beyond the arc, shows a nice long-range touch, when he's out there sometimes with Sloan, and when he is able to get ETSU an early 13-point lead in the first half and flirting with a 20-point lead in the second before ETSU finally wins by 10. The interesting thing about this, though, is the basket of the game was made just before halftime, a late layup by none other than David Sloan. So while Smith was big with his long-range three-pointers, it was actually Sloan that prevented the game from being a tie game going into halftime. His late layup did give ETSU momentum, and then in the start of the second half, ETSU took an 8-0 run they started the half with an 8-0 run. They didn't take an 8-0 run. They started the second half with an 8-0 run, had a 10-point lead, and after that, it was cruise control. Like I said, ETSU even flirted with a 20-point lead some point in the game. Now, 2 things here also. ETSU did struggle a bit with UNCG's full-court press. That's how UNCG was able to get back into the game in the first half before the Sloan layup gave the Bucks their lead back right before the half. And then also it should be mentioned, in addition to the emergence of Smith, you did have a circumstance where offensive rebounds were big for giving the Buccaneers their early 13-point lead. Neither of these two teams, UNCG or ETSU, are still really strong shooting teams, which is another cause of concern for the Buccaneers. But nevertheless, whole new roster, new coach, goes into Greensboro, who has the established coach, the established player, and they thump them. That's a statement for the programs. I also noticed this, of course, with the pandemic going on, there are few fans that are allowed to attend these games. It was hard to notice any difference, though, at Greensboro for a Greensboro Spartans game. That may seem like a cheap shot to the Spartans, and maybe it is, but they do play in a cavernous arena. Greensboro Coliseum, and I've been there many times. Saw the first Carolina Hurricanes game ever. That was at the Coliseum. Saw AC/DC open up their Ball Breaker tour. That was at the Coliseum there, So I've been to the Greensboro Coliseum. It's a great venue, but it's just a little bit larger than I think what Greensboro would like. Now, they can dream of the day, maybe that they're drawing 20,000 fans, but it's kind of the Cleveland Stadium feel. Back in the day when the Cleveland Indians played at Cleveland Stadium, there are legendary games that were played there in front of 70,000 fans, which is a lot of fans for a baseball game. World Series, pennant races during the Bob Feller era, but those were basically few and far between. More times than not, what you had were 5,000 people in a 70,000-seat stadium for, say, a Wednesday night August game when the Indians were already out of the pennant race. And that was a tough situation to play in front of. And Greensboro is the same thing. Now, you remember when ETSU played in the Mini-Dome, it was the same thing. They were rarely, if ever, going to sell that place out. However, when they moved to Freedom Hall, it's just a lot easier to sell 6,000 seats than it is 12,000. And I know that the fire marshal came in and capped the mini dome at 6,000. You still then were in a permanent situation of always having 6,000 empty seats at ETSU when they were in the mini dome. So the difference of these two programs, it's even a statement of where they choose to play their basketball games. Of course, it's my hope that ETSU will eventually go into a new arena. I'm the one guy who talks about that, but if ETSU ever is serious about becoming a mid-major powerhouse and the area is serious about being cosmopolitan, just need a new arena. Freedom Hall's obsolete, folks. I mean, you can only get so far playing on a high school campus if you are a college basketball program. And also, let's face it, there's nothing around Freedom Hall. You know what's around Freedom Hall? Get off my lawn. So, something to consider in the future, but in the immediate future, one of the more surprising teams in the Southern Conference comes into Johnson City on Wednesday, and that's Virginia Military, and VMI had a nice victory against Chattanooga today. VMI came in with a .500 record, and they were able to defeat Chattanooga, who only had played 7 players, but don't think that fatigue was what cost the Mocs this game, because the Keydets had a halftime lead against the Mocs, who came in with a 9-1 record. Now, the Mocs started 9-0. They're back as a basketball program, but they could not handle the three-point shooting of Greg Parham, who had 25 points. And you know who else was big for the Keydets? Jake Stevens, their 6'10 center. And remember that because ETSU was able to take the early lead against UNCG with offensive rebounding, VMI is going to have a 6'10 center on the floor. VMI's live by the three, die by the three. Of course, that's modern basketball, but this is a formidable opponent. Yeah, VMI's VMI, but the Running Roos, only 3-15 last year in the SoCon, but 8 of those losses were by 6 points or less. I've said this from top to bottom. There's no easy game in the Southern Conference, and although, I suppose it's certainly possible that VMI could finish 10th in the conference and Chattanooga could finish 1st, it is a situation. The any given Sunday in the NFL, I know it sounds like a cliche, but it's that way in the Southern Conference this year. Any given day, any team can beat another. That was proven by ETSU, and that was also proven by VMI. So they come into Johnson City a very formidable foe. If ETSU rests on their laurels and says, we're the top program in the SoCon and they're the worst, That's not going to be a very good deal for ETSU. Now, one of the things about ETSU, though, is I mentioned live by the three, die by the three. Cyril Smith Jr. was the starting point guard in this game, and I believe he'll be the starting point guard from here on out. I thought Smith had more upside potential than David Sloan, who started the first 8 games on the point for the Buccaneers, and he proved it. As I said, I don't necessarily like shooting point guards, but hard to argue with his three-point touch, 3 for 4 from beyond the arc, and 16 points in general. I think Smith will be the starter at the point for the rest of the way for ETSU. He's the better player, and really, I was very excited. I mean, getting a Maryland transfer to come to ETSU, that's big for the program. A statement victory against UNCG, it's a statement if you're ETSU and you can get transfers from Maryland. Very much a statement. But I'll tell you what could harm the Bucs going forward, and I've said this before, that I'm not necessarily sure that I like the fact that Jason Shea, the new head coach, isn't being all that transparent with the media. In fact, he's keeping a lot of information behind. And I mentioned earlier how when he suspended David Sloan for Western Carolina, there was no announcement made about it. And you just had to figure it out for yourself. What's he doing on street clothes? Why isn't he in the starting lineup? That sort of thing. And I think that's very Bush League, and I've explained why. Now, some people online, they've made shoot-the-messenger type comments towards me. I guess it goes with the territory and all this. But none of them really refuted that, yeah, it was a good thing to suppress information. Never is. And I'll give you an example. Back in 1994, when VMI came into Johnson City to play ETSU and came away with a victory, one of the reasons why was the head coach of ETSU, Alan LaForce, had fallen ill before the game and could not coach the Buccaneers in the game. As a result, John Schulman, later to coach at Chattanooga, now the coach at Alabama Huntsville, only a few years off of being Joe McPherson's assistant at University High, he got the call to lead the Buccaneers as their head coach that day. And Bart Belair's, who had a decent run by VMI standards as the Keydets coach in the mid-90s, actually interviewed for the Virginia Tech job once. But anyway, Bart Belair's Cagers were able that day to defeat the Buccaneers. But here's what I remember. I was there. I was on the floor. I was part of student media. I was shooting for the campus TV station. But we were handed a flyer before the game. Alan LaForce has fallen ill, and John Schulman will be the head coach today. That's standard operating procedure if your starting point guard isn't going to play because of suspension. That's standard operating procedure if, let's say, you've got some injured players and they're not going to play, or that 2 players are out because of pandemic restrictions or something of that nature. That's the way it should be done. That's the way it was done at ETSU. That's the way it should be done again. Just a memo to Jason Shea about, you don't want to be the coach that doesn't relate to the media because you're not willing to tell the media and the fans anything. That will kill the branding of ETSU. And there's no gain to be made for it. There's nothing to gain by failing to reveal your starting lineup or what have you. So, until next time, I'm Marky Billson. I want to ask you to hit the like button on YouTube and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Also, you can follow me on Medium and, of course, Facebook, Twitter, that sort of thing. So until next time, I'm Marky Billson. So long, everyone.